It says starting. The event will start. Wait for the host to start.
We are live now.
Okay. Yeah, welcome Samir and for this discussion on uh, the role of technology innovation in privacy, managing privacy and governing it better. So, in this coming 30 to 40 minutes, uh, definitely would like to dwell down to the work that you have been doing, largely not focusing on a product but engineering idea that you put together, and also the things that you see around privacy enhancing technology. And when we talk about privacy enhancing technology, what do we mean about it actually, right? And what are different kind of technology engineering ideas that are coming, why engineering and technology ideas are important in terms of managing the problems of privacy, and what kind of experiences that you have helping with some of the organization in India and other parts of the globe, and how it is in a way easy or difficult or complex to implement privacy in enterprise environment like a larger bank or a new age company, or for that matter different sectors of industry, and especially the banking environment. And we will also try to dwell into there is definitely things converge. Security, privacy. People say
AI.
there are two sides of the one coin, but is it true? And is there basically difference in that? What kind of challenges that AI bring to the table? And when we look at all these challenges, we also look at overall implementation of a privacy in enterprise context, implementation of privacy in MSME context, and how exactly uh, this ecosystem is evolving. And for companies which are looking for a very sustainable compliance, how could they achieve? And technology is one critical way to achieve that. And what makes technology a way of implementing privacy different from the other procedural practices driven implementation privacy, basically. And in all that role of data, because things, when it becomes privacy, the data centric approach to overall privacy becomes very important. So these are some of the things that we would actually like to cover as a part of this interaction. And Samir is no, there's no better person than Samir who had been invested in terms of building tech for privacy for a long, and also he toggle or travel between US and India, understand both of this market, how they are evolving in terms of policy and regulation, also the client, kind of client that he sees there, and client that he's serving it here. So, and then one of the important uh, uh, startup, I may say, in a data privacy or data protection area, the experience of building such kind of tech is also very important to understand for me. So, Samir, can you just start with uh, this entire engineering idea that you thought about building for privacy, and having been worked as a consultant and then looking to solve problems through technology way. So these are a little bit dichotomy I see, right? And why this dichotomy, and why you see the technology is the way to solve the problems of privacy?
No, no, thank you for having me, Vinayak, and of course DSCI. First, let me tell you, you're doing great work, right? Whether it's startup or large enterprises, right? The ecosystem you're bringing together is wonderful, and definitely privileged to be part of this conversation. And I know we've been associated with DSI for a while. So I think the first thing where this whole engineering idea, right? And that's a very good a segue, right, to even explain my career, right, in terms of that why this. So I'm basically a tech founder and practitioner founder, right, and I proudly say that, right. So before starting Ardent, I almost spent like 2 decades in security. And that journey definitely has a lot, right? Why we need to solve this problem, and how still it is not basically getting solved. So earlier, basically prior to this, I led the security engineering team at Lockheed Martin. Spent almost 8 to 9 years there. Prior to that, I was with Symantec actually on both product side. Whether you talk endpoint protection, you talk about IT GRC, both side of the world. Some in US, some in India. I was in Pune as well. And also I spent some time at Deloitte, right? That was my reason to actually move to US around 2007. So audit, assurance, risk. And prior to that, there was a company called MILE Security. So I spent very early 9 years overall. So I think I've seen this journey, right? And definitely when I was actually going through this from product, right, I joined the customer, which was actually Lockheed. And I used to support, right, $500 million contract vehicle and the security around that as an architect, right? And also in the operational perspective, one thing was actually bothering me a lot, right, overall. So, and when we actually architect, so we used to have like 100 and 150, around 100 applications, right, coming, going live, or at least being upgraded or whatever. And what is the security stack we need to put, right from data center to cloud to um, mobile or whatever, right, overall. So one thing I clearly said, so a lot of security, if you see a lot of CISO brain power or even the organizational brain power is exhausted, also the budget, I think. And I think people, or rather the people can do on the comments if it is around. If you see the budget, almost 50% we are spending on malware, right? And this problem we evolved like who 1980 or something, right? In terms of antivirus malware. So that's number one, and I think that should be the solved problem right now, right? In terms of the you put it as a platform, you put that at the perimeter, or do basically runtime, doesn't matter, right? So that's number one. Number two, we basically secure this defense in depth, right? Network security, we all grew up with it, right? So we were doing firewalls and then CASBs in new area, IPS, IDS, but still we are securing the entry points to the enterprise, right, overall. And third, we do a lot of basically the investigative check, right? So whether it's process audit, your SOC 2, ISO, or whatever, we did a lot of those, right? Technical vulnerability assessment, database, ASPM, whatever you. So that's absolutely necessary and good, right, overall. But in this entire context, right, if you see, the one part missing is I never had that what data are we protecting. So right, somebody actually involves me in the architectural meeting, right? The first question I used to ask that, okay, tell me what data is at stake here, right? So the and what is the business here, right? Understanding, and then what data. So it's not at all data centric, and still I wish, right? So 5 6 years ago I thought that's the problem, and the one of the best
I
use
think
cases
what
that
I'm
was.
understanding, and this is important point, let me interject Samir here. So what you're saying is you might have very advanced sound comprehensive security solution and primarily from the infrastructure perspective, but while you implement all that, it may not necessarily be data centric in nature, right?
Not
And
at all.
last 10 years we talk about data is crown jewel, but the entire implementation until now, maybe it has changed recently, has been always remain as infrastructural in nature basically, and that's the point you are making, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Right. So, and then we invented a concept called data bill of materials, right? I know you've been basically have that in even the DCPP LA training I heard from you. So thank you for mentioning that. So if I don't have a bill of material, how can I even do security? If I don't know what my critical assets are, now I do understand that's a difficult problem to solve, right? But I was a practitioner founder, right? Overall, so wanted to solve, because if we don't solve difficult problem, how we can actually solve the entire. Because see, eventually people are not going to go after software network, right? It's after data. So all breaches, if you see currency of the breaches, it's all about data, right? How much sensitive uh, data we lost. So that's the whole notion. And often in security, what I learned over the period of time, that you definitely need a compliance driver, right? So PII, the privacy is the great, or rather the compliance driver to know your data, right? And that's how I started the whole Ardent piece. Now, the only change over last 3 to 4 years, and actually, I was very happy when I go to this RSA conference, right? And those buses and the whole marketing around that actually shows, right, where the industry is going. So I see for last 3 years or so, DSPM, right, data security posture management, which we also basically support. But the DSPM at least got some angle to it. But even if you see fundamentally, it is very cloud driven, right? Because cloud is API based. So we are basically innovating a lot there, because on prem, most of the banks or the big companies, right, their data still have basically is sometimes even in mainframes and in data centers. And if that is not covered, how come? So data bill of material, and when we do, if we have a SBOM tool to do, right? We have CBOM. I saw the recent article or the other paper that was actually really insightful paper, was published around BOM by DSCI. So I think data bill of material, your sensitive data bill of material is absolutely important as far as uh, the
So
security is
certainly
concerned. And
we'll come to
one
data bill of material.
statistics,
Yeah, but let's try to spend some time because you really talked about type of data security solution, right? Let's try to categorize uh, a kind of data security technologies for that matter, right? So one is one segment is certainly the discovery, classification, and probably in that same thing data bill of material will fall, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, data discovery, classification, know your data, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
absolutely important, right? You
Yeah,
are a
but then
small
again, in fact,
organization
I think you are taking this
or
discovery
a large.
discovery and all discussion to the next level by talking about data bill of material, because this language that you brought to the table is a little bit beyond the data discovery, right? So, so help us understand how this is different from the typical discovery that people talk about, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I was actually wrote an article, and IPP actually there is a whole. If you search, frankly, I was the first one. So if you actually do a data bill of material search, you will see my article there. Actually, it was picked up by IPP earlier. So I think discovery is the step one there,
Hmm.
right? Overall, when you need bill of materials, but you need who is the owner, right? What is the life cycle? So we still basically a concept in work depend on how many columns we put, right? So in terms of how you are processing that data, that can be also done. What kind of sensitive data, right? What's the classification of it overall? Who is the owner? Who is the custodian for it? And first of all, where it is in the organization and why it is also, right? Overall, which third parties are accessing. Now it does get into the more of a also something similar is ROPA, right? In GDPR, we talk about record of, but it's very confined to the PII and the processing activities, right? So it does not cover the whole thing. That's where the DBOM basically comes in picture. And every organization, every CISO, every CDO, I think they should have what data eventually you are protecting. Because if you see, protecting everything is protecting nothing. That's what I say now, right? Overall, because there is ton of stuff out there. If you run your vulnerability assessment reports, there are like thousands of pages, right? Overall. So what to fix first, right? What to prioritize, that for that also it's absolutely important.
Yeah. So, and then I think what I'm understanding is there is a lot of nuances that are associated with data. There are a lot of dimensions that needs to be looked at, and there are a lot of consideration that you should be bringing to the table when you talk about security of data, and going away from taking discovery ahead and going beyond the classification. Data build up material will add a lot of those context dimensions nuances to the table, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So now once you have that, right? So so there are a lot of things that you can think about in terms of privacy, right? And the next group is certainly type of technologies, like technology which is helping you to protect, like DLP, data leak prevention, or information risk management, or some kind of cryptography basically, right? But there is a other set of thing is like how do you really create a some level of uh, uh, there are various different objective, right? And you rightly talked about is not only privacy, so overall security as well. So one is certainly because privacy, large part of privacy is a lot of private procedural compliances, right? You there are a lot of things needs to be done uh, um, to streamline the process and task required for the privacy, right? So how, and then there is also some of the things which are obligations for the privacy. One of the important obligation is like you need to provide these subject access request and support those kind of requirement, right? Then you may probably need to make sure that in the entire ecosystem, the if you have to protect it, but also breach happens and you have to manage it. So with this foundation of a DBOM you have, tell us how it really manifests the different kind of things that you need to do for privacy, different obligations that you have to comply with for the privacy. So can you just help us how did this get manifest to solve some other problems in the enterprise ecosystem?
Yeah, yeah. So first, I think I would start, and I basically have done this enough number of times that I'll do that for right fundamental, right? So I did this when we had a booth at RSA like few
Yeah.
years ago, or rather, that what is difference between security and privacy, right? Overall. So I think let's explain that, right? And it's a very straightforward definition, but I think even as a security professional, a lot of times we do not understand the obligation of basically what privacy is all about. So I will get that clear, and I do this in customer conversation very first time because it's very lot of times people assume that you have security means you have privacy, right? And that's not the case. So when we have a house, right, and this is if you have collapsible door, you have windows, you have compound, you have a security guard, that's all security, right? External part of it. Your curtain is your privacy, right? So you want to open the curtain when you want the sunlight to in. You want to close the curtain if you are basically you need some biological privacy, right? Change clothes, or you don't want basically others to see overall. So I think it's very important. So what that means is enterprises have already access to data, right? So it's about more about transparency, right? So you have access to the data. So control you do for outsiders. Insiders already have data. How responsibly you use that data, right, as per your consent notice or the way your basically contract is with the end customer. I think that is the important part of the privacy. Now the very first thing, if we talk about the data principal rights, or if we talk about data uh, similar privacy obligations, the first thing, right, privacy, or rather the whole data bill of material gathering is very important, right, DBOM, because that's the should be a fundamentally first step, right? So for example, I have a large basically bank, or maybe another corporate or maybe oil company, right, whatever. So first of all, I need to know, right, who are the business owners, what kind of data they have, how much is PII, employee, customer, all kind of data. So I think the DBOM, or rather, is a very good idea, right? Overall, anyway, what data you have, even from the security standpoint, right? So obligations, if you want me to explain, I think, I hope I understood the question correctly. So
My question is
no,
like, for example, me in the privacy, right? You need to do so many different things, right? So many processes that needs to be done, right? So many tasks that needs to be looked at. So, um, uh, so and because privacy is largely procedurally, you need to be comply with a lot of those things, right? And then how do you make sure that you make sure that every transaction that is happening is complying with the obligations
yeah,
of
yeah.
privacy, and it happens for millions and billions of transactions you may be doing basically. So what you so engineering wise, how do you really automate this process and task required so that every time if there is some kind of a question comes, some kind of a breach happens, some kind of investigations happen, that you are able to prove that you are taken due care in each and every
Due
transaction.
diligence.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, and I think I used to get this question, right, a lot of times. So we have a six-step execution plan, right, for
Hmm.
data privacy, and we put that actually in the DPDPA context. And if you actually go on our website, it's actually I have put that for pretty much most of the regulations. But say, for example, DPDPA. So step one is the privacy impact and data protection impact assessments, right? First, I need to know, right, what the scope is, and there is a the whole set of questionnaires, both sides. Huh? One is from the procedural side of it, and I'll tell you the discovery next, right? Overall, so who is the business owner for that data, and who is responsible for what system is like, what type of data it collects, right? Whether it collects Aadhaar. So the first thing is PIA. Number two is basically data discovery and classification or identification, right? Actually generating the data bill of material. So you go and make sure all the data you got in the PIA or DPIAs, right? Is it correct, right? You also have a capability if you have, right? Just like what we have in Turtle Shield. If you can connect that dots with the data discovery, then you can also that can help. So go across all your applications, go across your servers, right? Whatever the infrastructure has. That's number two. Number three is enable the DPRM, right? Data principal rights management. Once you have the inventory of the data, you know who is processing, right? And from the PIA perspective. Next is your data principal, right? So your right to know, right to delete, right to correct, right? Just like what we do in the RTI segment, right? So similar, not exactly, but if I'm Samir and if I'm a customer of, say, for example, ICICI Bank or any bank, I can ask that what data you have on me and delete it or opt out, all that. So enable that both procedurally as well as from the discovery standpoint. Because also for that, how will you find Samir's or John Doe's data among the entire infrastructure, right? So those capabilities you need. Then the fourth step comes is consent. Once you have the whole solid inventory of what data you have, right? So you need to make sure that whatever data you're collecting for the customer, there is a consent gathered for it, right? So collection of consent, then users have option of revoking um, the consent, and also it has to be provable, right? So that's number four step. Number five step, and these are actually mapped to other rules earlier we published. Other thing is data minimization and privacy by design, right? So are you taking controls, are you collecting the minimum data? So those are from the design perspective. And also there are certain data retention guidelines, right? That if you are a gaming company, you cannot store that data more than certain time. If you are a government, right, there has to be every piece of data, right, has to have a life. It cannot be unlimited, right, overall. And last but not the least, what if the data breach happens, right? So sixth step, that what are the post data breach management things privacy team has to do. So what was compromised, how many users, right? Have you told your users, have you created that transparency that told them as soon as it happened based of your attempt overall? So see
Yeah.
like cert like stuff. So six steps, and I think I hope that answers
In
the
this,
question.
yeah, so this is very well laid down 6 steps, Amir. But these 6 steps are against millions of things that you will do in the organization, right? And that's where the roll up engineering product comes into place, right? So tell us how these 6 steps you can really help engineering capability to address the challenges of this volume, complexity, diversity that needs to be taken care of.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's a definitely a full-time work, right? So very first step is you need to have resources committed to it, right? Whether you call
Yeah, so
data
that's a
protection officer.
that's a overall from organization side. I'm saying from how the product, like you build a
Yeah.
product for them, how your product
So
is.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
product is there are three. One is procedural process flow, right? And
yeah,
another is technology, right? And
yeah,
also there is a data protection side of it. Once you get
yeah,
this data bill of material, you also need to do tokenized deletion, whatever, right? Whatever things
yeah,
you need to do. So the way, and I'll explain that to just make it easy, right? How do we see that kind of
yeah,
approach? So number one is you need a centralized system of record, right? Overall, that hey, what are my privacy obligations? So the privacy impact assessment, what we call privacy automation, the whole platform, say for example. So what that did is it's your single system of record where you collect all the PIs, send it to assigned people because you need to make them accountable, right? overall. And there are a lot of automation, right? You assign those to the right amount of people, get them right, and do that quarterly,
Yeah.
yearly. What is number one? Number two, you also basically connect the dots with actually discovering the data bill of material, right? Overall. So
Yeah.
we do the
Yeah.
discovery and find out at first cut, right? What kind of how much, and he very focused on privacy and security angle of it, right? You can also actually do a data security posture management activity with it. So right, so it can be super complementary, and we actually now also started doing that. Then what you do is you enable the same privacy automation. The next is DPRM, right? Data principal rights management. So you need to have a website where people have phone number as well as a form, right? Which will actually triage to your internal systems, right? Automate that workflow overall. And on the same
Yeah,
side, if
because
somebody asks,
I just little bit spending time on this data subject access request. So many big organization will be taking multiple of those requests and then mapping that internally where it is relevant and then taking those actions. It's a very complex things that needs to be browsed, right? So how the engineering or tech can solve this problem of, because this is one of the important diligence, right? Ki how there is a timeline also devised to respond to the user in a proper time period, and there are hundreds of thousands of probably grievances that will be coming basically. So how tech plays role, I mean, in terms of managing this subject access better.
yeah. So number one, it's a compliance item, right? So you
Hmm.
need to have system of record, right?
Yeah.
Number one. So centralized system and very purpose built for what you are doing, right? You have ton of workflow tools, but you need something which works for privacy. Now, all these requests, right? There is a whole bunch of automation, right? And you can do some Gen AI or AI activities, like some agents, or rather, I would say, if you want to go, if it kind of makes sense, if the volume, right? If volume is too large. So one of the key factor there, Vinayak, is verifiable request, right? So you might be knowing, right? In Europe, somebody actually the whole did a DBR data subject request and asked like his wife's bank financial data from 50 different institutions, and they didn't know it. And then GDPR actually added the verifiable consent. So you need to verify it, whether it's OTP or whatever email address you have. So there has to be automation there overall. Once when you triage that, right, overall it has to be assigned to right folks, right, overall. So say for example, I'm in a bank and there is a credit card department, loan department. Are we sending that to the right person? And those things can be automated if you call it AI or general, like, robotic process automation. You can use a lot of those tech, right, to make that job, because I get this question a lot, right? What if we get millions of kind of requests? Fortunately or unfortunately, I mean, in on the other side of the world, right, US, we didn't get those many requests in terms of in earlier part of the whole part. But now I think with the whole AI, right, the usage of chatbots and the humongous amount of data we actually submit to the chat GPT and those kind of platforms, right? It's gonna be even more dangerous, right? For that. So what data somebody took and actually that inferred, right? So the automation components are how you can automate this task so
So,
people don't have to
Swarnim,
do
there is
human. But
so one part here which because I just want, I'm also looking at the questions and comments which are coming, and there is very interesting, um, probably question came here. Is if you have to really talk about two top ways, right, where the engineering capabilities that you have been building or somebody will be building basically could help the customer. You can take an example of your existing customer, ki how primary to critical way, top way basically, that you are able to help customers solve this problem basically.
yeah, yeah, very direct question. I'm happy to, right? So I'll tell the simple example, right? We started this journey almost like now 3 years ago at HDFC Bank, right? So very first thing, right? So like I was necessarily earlier wanted to solve the very hard problem, discovery. So I went to the basically team that, hey, we're gonna do the whole data bill of materials and discovery. But what we found out very quickly, that we need to do privacy impact assessment, and those impact assessments need to be automated, right? There has to be a system of record, right? Overall. So I think first you need to have, right? Now, can you do those in spreadsheets? Yes. Is it the right way to do it? Because say, for example, you have a consultant come in, how are you going to track that, right? Overall. So the very first thing, if I want to implement DPDPA, the very first step I should do is do the privacy impact assessment, right? And if you're talking about two ways, we actually I explained all six ways. So we
Yeah,
actually
so
our product or
one certainly me, I think I'm just getting answer to that question is like because of DBOM, um, uh, it is actually easy. I mean, the DBOM layer that you created, so which is feeding to a lot of things. So one is certainly data protection impact assessment, but there are many other areas, including data subject access request to data deletion, right? So this is a, one of the top way that you found like this layer, foundational layer, is the one of the important critical intervention that you brought, and that is helping in so many different ways for the organization. This is one important thing, right? DBOM is one important thing. What could be the second critical important thing?
yeah, so I think consent is another big area. So we do basically the deletion part and that one part, right? First is the major challenge is you need to have a provable and auditable way that you did your due diligence. So discovery happens with that. Next big thing is consent, right? So the basically the collection of the consent, storage of consent, and also the revocation of the
Yeah,
consent, right? So the centralized database where you collect all those consents, and that's how but there are like multiple applications, right? Overall in the any organization, so there is a lot of basically connection, right? You need to build connectors around that, but you need a centralized system to manage your consent and uh,
yeah. So
have give users.
one is DPOM, which helps you, including and assured data deletion is certainly big problem, and because of DPOM, your ability to help in that is definitely one. And consent is critical because consent legitimizes the collection and processing information. But consent can't be very superficial, simplistic. It has to be connecting to each and every process, function, services, project that you must be doing something and getting consent, because nowadays specific purpose get connected to the consent, and that's why managing consent and managing obligations of that is a second key way that the tech is helping organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that you need to actually do that, right? I mean, in terms of even there are various questions how you do that for legacy
Yeah,
and how you basically do that. But yeah, get all the consent, right? Overall, what the data you are collecting. And also, you need to look at whether you really need to collect that data, right? When you do these PIAs, a lot of organizations do not need that data, right? So there are going to be more restrictions on what you collect and what you should not.
yeah. So Samir, we talked about big organization like HDFC Bank and kind of complexity you handle, right? But data protection regulation in India and other parts of globe is also for the lot of small and medium scale organization, right? They are equally responsible for complying with data protection regulation, right? So how does they prepare themselves, and how does this emerging digital first India is now country of lot of unicorn early stage startup basically. So how, and then they can't afford also the big consulting companies to help with the compliances basically, right? So how do you make see that they are able to leverage some of this capability to make sure that everything that you do with this data is satisfying the obligations of privacy they are exposed to?
Yeah, yeah. So especially, right? So if you are a consumer focused company, I think it applies much more, right? So if you are a
Yeah.
consumer fintech overall, of course, as long as you collect customer data. So one problem I see, right? The moment you ask the early stage companies you ask them a security question, hey, are you compliant? The clear answer is, hey, we don't need this. We don't collect any data, right? Overall. So I think this regulation, the whole objective of regulation is not that you don't collect data for legitimate purposes or don't store data, but it is you just use that responsibly. So I think the number one advice I have for small and medium businesses is start early, right? Overall, I know you may not have a dedicated DPO and you don't need one, right? In any case, if you're a 10 people company, 20 people company, right? You don't need a separate DPO, but there is a CTO, right? So you have a CTO. So I think as early you can actually take those. It will also actually help you sell your product more, right? So if you're a SaaS platform, and if you follow those privacy controls and you have those seals, it helps, right? Overall, so not just part of the seal. I see a lot of companies, or rather commoditization of SOC 2 compliance. So I'm not big fan of that. Rather, if I want to spend first dollar on the security and privacy, I will rather basically put some control, right? The uh, not just the certification. So the getting the context of that whole thing, I think that's how the small medium businesses should take. What is your need, right? And there are ton of resources available, right? In terms of,
Yeah.
you talk about tech, and I'm pretty sure most of the tools, right, they start with a very I would say lower tier. So you start with something and then uh, go across as you
Yeah.
grow as an organization.
So I mean, I'm just taking one or two more questions which is coming in the comments. So there's one question: data asset register. Is DBM same as data asset register or is different?
Yeah, so it goes beyond the data asset register. I have the whole format written, right, for the bill of material, and I would love to actually have. I think Ankur is there to contribute to that, and if we create the RFC around that. So I think it's not just a data catalog or anything, right? That of course the catalog will be subset of that, but also who is ownership, right? Who is using that data? So as much information you can put, and it's for entire organizational data, right? Not just PII, or you may have a sensitive data which is not PII. So I would basically put it that way.
And see, on the privacy perspective, the purpose is very important, Samir, right? Um,
Yeah,
um,
purpose of collection.
so, if the DBM also captures the purpose, or that comes as a uh, because there is a database bill of material, data bill of material, on top of that, it is used for privacy. Then you add purpose as a layer to that, or how does the purpose get into the picture actually?
Yeah, yeah. So there are, of course, so it has to be at a macro level, right? Overall, right? And as much macro as you can go, right? So if you can define the purpose, absolutely, right? If it's a financial application, right, you can basically mention purpose, why you are collecting that data, because you want to provide that certain services, and this application is one part of that. So absolutely, that's will should be part of the uh, data bill of material if there is a purpose. So every IT system, right, which you bring, right? So if you do that right, when you actually provision that, uh, right, why it is and when it is. So I think, yeah, absolutely, purpose is part of that.
Yeah. So Samir, uh, we are just now moving a little bit on conclusion, but before that, so the tech for privacy is an important thing, right? And uh, because privacy, yes, you can implement through consulting, you can implement to some kind of process intervention, some kind of manual effort, but innovation is now playing very important role in terms of solving problem in a very sustainable way, right? And um, um, do you see the ecosystem in India is now awakening to work with a startup like you, or try to experiment with the innovation that you are bringing together? To what level these experimentations are happening?
Yeah, good question, right? And I can't call startup myself, right? We are early stage company, right? I think
Yeah,
I can take use that for some
yeah,
purpose. But absolutely. So I think that's the main question, right? Or rather theme of our discussion here. So first of all, I told you, right, a lot of these problems are not solved, right? At the organization, you have the biggest platform, you purchased, basically spending millions of dollars, right? And if you don't have a debomb, right, so you can use like early stage companies or even late stage companies like us, right, to do that. So that experimentation can be only because they will care more about, right, rather than if you have a now we do have a finished product, but in early stages, right, the way we work together, there were a lot of basically incentives, right, if you work with the early stage companies, because they are also sometimes trying to gather, right, what customers want. overall. And the main thing, right, which large organization actually fear, right, when working with the startups is, what if something happens, right? How can I trust you overall? But if you see, if you work with the right company, right, uh, these are all basically folks coming from, right, practitioners coming from the large companies, starting this venture. So they have a ton of experience. This experience is at your juncture, right, for building the tech. You can automate a lot of functions, and also you can improve your security posture, right? I mean, if I am been basically CISO of company, and if somebody gives me the bomb, right, I will do without any say, because if you go and basically procure something just to do that, I think that's the pretty big undertaking. But now I think if you see, the companies are mature enough, right from the beginning, as far as their maturity and the kind of problem they are solving. So absolutely, every large company should actually leverage, right, this um, the the ecosystem to get themselves actually secure and comply with DPDPA, right, compliance.
So, Samir, before we close, I'll pick up a couple of more comments or questions which has come. One is you talked about this assured delivery, right? But once you collect data, data proliferates across the organization, right? And there are hundreds of desktop applications that do get shared, right? So how do you really make sure that the deletion is assured in nature?
Oh yeah, that's interesting, right? So NIST has a standard for that, right? I think it is 800, or
Yeah,
rather,
there's some standard on that. Yeah,
yeah, 171, I think, right? Overall. So we follow, right? So you can give like 20 passes versus 22 passes. So but more than that, right? Most of the deletion we do in organization today, that's end of life only, correct? And you can't also do that in the cloud, right? Because you don't have control of data, right? So there is a crypto shredding and those kind of methods. But assured deletion is, you made sure it's your provable that you did your fair attempt, right, to delete your data, and that needs to be basically provable. So that's what we call assured deletion within your context, because I think right to delete is your right now in terms of what you're doing for the DPDPA or even GDPR. So I think there was a AI question. I would love to actually talk a little bit about that. We didn't talk about AI in this age and era
yeah.
overall. So one thing I want to put there, right? So can we talk on the architecture to follow in AI, considering privacy and sensitive data like centralized, decentralized, federated,
Yeah.
blockchain,
Yeah, I wanted to
etc.
come
Right?
to that because when we talk about that, and there was a question on that as well, right? So we so one is architectural preferences, right? So federated blockchain based architecture do play a role in furthering the privacy in the context of AI that you talk about basically, right? So the kind of work you do largely falls in terms of helping to administer, govern, manage better. But there is also architecturally federation, blockchain, decentralization also works basically. So what is your comment on that?
What is?
Your comment on that actually, right? So what do you
Yeah. So
see?
I think the
Yeah,
whole part, right? I think with the whole AI context and quantum, right? Those are the two things hitting very fast than what we. I mean, I think in 2020 or 22, right? Basically, the whole Chat GPT was launched, and I think the whole security world over last year, I see, right, all the focus. And I think this is a challenge with we as a security professional all the time, right? Cloud comes and everybody goes after cloud, and before we fix privacy and security, or rather your traditional stuff, then you have this whole AI context coming. But I think fundamentals are not changing, because it's all about data, right? What data you feed to AI and how you protect that data. So again, whether it's debomb, discovery, classification, right? Whatever is there, that is the number one step. More you do it, or rather, if you have, then one thing we actually recently launched, right? Overall, that if you see the AI security space, a lot of stuff is around how do you basically you upload some data, right? DLP way, like to the chatbots, and then you scan that. whether there is an injection vulnerability, right? Same thing like what we do for endpoints in the malware space. But I think the important part, right, which needs to be covered there, what enterprise data you are exposing to AI, right? Overall, and how AI using. So I see a lot of promises. I did a LinkedIn post other day with one of the AI founder that, hey, how do you assure, right, that my data is basically not being utilized? Because I buy this new laptop and it's basically the AI powered copilot. You don't even have option to disable that, right? Overall, in terms of, so I think decentralized will be wonderful if we are talking about, but it really depends. It's a difficult to answer on, like you have to have a use case overall. Now blockchain, was, I think there are use cases, I think in identity world we are using, or rather there are some legit use cases.
Yeah, I think in
Federated
identity,
learning is awesome and means
yeah,
I think, but
there are some experimentations going on some of the applications in India, like DigiYatra is a great example of that. Um, but Samir, as we are a little bit closing, and I want to cover one of the important question which has been asked here, is uh, the key challenges of implementing data security and privacy in Indian context, right? So, because you have been working with Indian clients and customers, so what kind of challenges you encounter? I know you talked about people are doing more POCs, not actual implementation. That's definitely one important challenge. But beyond that, what are those challenges that you think are important?
yeah, I think going beyond traditional vendors, right, for the large enterprises, if I see, right, there at least must be 500,000 large enterprises, right? So I think the whole ecosystem, right, the early stage startup, India, or basically US or whatever, the all this ecosystem is ready to digest those solution, right? So first of all, my basically the advice, right, that do look at those tech, right, overall before you actually do, because it can basically save you a lot of money, and also it will give you much larger or more actually capacity. Major challenge in the data security aspect of it is, I think, the budgeting and the category establishment, right, overall. So we are still stuck to the categorization of the security. So the primary three categorization I told you, right, three or four. One is malware, next is your firewalls and endpoints, or whatever the firewall and entry points, and third one is your scanner. So if you're 90, and I will actually wanted to tell that statistics by one of the data security company did very like decade ago, and I think it's still true, is 82 to 92% of the enterprise security budget today is actually assigned to anything but securing actual data. So where that is going, the three factors I told, right? Your malware platform, your firewalls, and what. So they were all good for the times, and but I think they should be commoditized now, in terms of the. So major challenge is how that category, right? The whole, where do I get budget, right? And other main challenge is very from the compliance, that hey, abhi tak to, there is no DPDPA rules yet, right? Overall, you can't wait until the government enforces, because your compliance is going to be much expensive if you don't that early do that early. If you take as much time until something is got, it's basically going to be a last minute purchase, whatever. So I think the another challenge is the I got enough to do, right, and the if law is not enforced, I should do it. So what I'm saying is you need to take a midway, and I do understand, right, the budgets are driven by the compliance sometimes and many times,
And I think
but
this is also not able to have enforcement. Even we had this law passed in 2013, 2023 is definitely one important challenge. And um, but as you rightly said, ki you should look beyond the compliances, and that's where the role of the technologies that are getting built in India could really make a sense to this market and also grow in this Indian market, basically, right? And that's the larger message that you want to draw, right?
yeah, absolutely. And I think you have tremendous advantages, right? Data bill of material or data discovery classification is still unsolved problem, right?
Yeah.
And privacy is actually a good business driver, right? Overall, because anyway you got to do it. So do it today or tomorrow. You need that for DPDPA. So I think if you find the multifaceted funding, or basically a budget allocation for that, I think it's not that difficult to do, right? These are very foundational control. Anyway, you should do it, right, for your organization, because I don't think it's a risk is like less, right? You see these data breaches every day,
Yeah.
and there is so much actually your so due diligence is actually important from all, whether it's your customers, your security, then your organizational reputation, compliance. I think there is no other, or rather, we need to wait for another reason to actually do that,
Yeah,
not to
with,
do that. Sorry.
with this note, I think with very important critical line of summarization that you use right now is like is a very foundational thing that you do for your organization, and these foundational things, irrespective of compliance or not compliance, would help organization in many sense, not only privacy but many other objectives as well. I think that's the appeal to the Indian ecosystem is to start looking to solve this problem more at a fundamental level. And with that note, I will like to conclude this discussion. We already crossed our designated time for this. Thank you,
Oh,
Samir, for joining us.
no, thanks for having. And I'll ask one question everybody is asking you, right? When the rules are coming, Vinayak sir.
We hope to see that happen in this month.
Okay, oh, that's good. Oh, that's basically what you call the reveal, huh? No, no, absolutely. I saw something yesterday in the
No, no, yeah,
website of our.
I think let's see. Yeah, with this month, the discussion happening around that, we hope to see. Come, we are happy to see coming as early as to yesterday, but let's hope to see that happens in a short possible time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for having me and whole what you do at DSCI. Have a
Thank you.
wonderful day.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you.
Yeah, bye
Thank
bye.
you, Pancham.